Please listen carefully.
Hey everyone, welcome to the 21st episode of the Study Space podcast, a show dedicated to helping students like you earn better grades, navigate your college journey, and become lifelong learners. My name is Julian Vu, the founder and lead software engineer at Uniplan.
And my name is David Chung, content strategist at Uniplan.
Joining us today is a very special guest. His name is Sai, who is an international student, or at least was an international student, who very recently graduated from my alma mater at SJSU. Welcome to the podcast, Sai.
Hi, Julian. Hi, David. Thanks for having me. So my name is Sai. Like Julian said, I went to San Jose State University and majored in computer science and did a minor in math. During my free time, I do enjoy reading. I like reading biographies, autobiographies, politics, some things about the economy, sometimes a little philosophy. Yeah,
that's definitely one difference between my degree and Sai's is that I actually didn't do the math minor. I know I've mentioned a lot that I graduated from university within 3 years. The math minor was definitely something that I thought about because, historically, computer science was just in general a math degree first and foremost. So there are a lot of concepts that between math and computer science, they sort of blend together. We take a pretty significant amount of math courses, I'd say. How many more classes did you need to take in math to earn the math minor?
Right. So for upper division computer science, there are already some math courses, but there's a limit. I think you can only do like 2 upper division CS/math course. And on top of that, if you do one extra math course, either differential equations or advanced linear algebra or something along those lines, then it would fulfill. So that's why I did it, actually. It's just one extra course.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, I was definitely considering it, but I instead wanted to fill my time with electives and such like, and I also wanted to stay on track for that 3-year graduation. So never got around to fitting in the extra math course I needed for a math minor. But oh well, a math minor is really, really cool. Like I said, computer science, historically a math degree. A lot of the concepts bleed over, so it just makes sense that it's so closely tied with math. And like Sai said, only one extra class, and you've got a math minor and a computer science major at SJSU. So, as always, we always like to start off our episodes asking about everybody's inspiration. So, I guess I'll start with you, Sai, since you're our special guest. I'd like to ask you, what is inspiring you today?
So what has been inspiring me for this week, really? So I'm a huge fan of soccer, European soccer especially. And because of COVID-19, a lot of the live sports, not only soccer, has been put on hold. So they've put the regular season on hold, and some seasons, some countries decided to just put a halt to it. So they won't be restarting it anymore. But some of the countries, especially Spain, England, I think Germany as well, they are starting they are restarting their season. So Spain started over this weekend, and England is starting tomorrow. So it's something that I'm really looking forward to. After months of literally zero live sports, it's really going to be fun and something to look forward to in the mornings over here.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah. I am unfortunately not much of a sports person. I never really grew up with sports or watching sports, really. So glad to see that you are indeed interested in sports, and I'm glad that you're able to see your favorite sport back on TV, given the whole pandemic. Do you typically call it soccer, or do you usually call it football?
I mean, yeah, I call it football, but I think since coming here, my lingo has sort of Americanized, and yeah, even when I go back home, so I'm from Malaysia, by the way. So when I go back to my parents' house, I tend to call it soccer, and I tend to use the American uh, lingo for other things as well. So yeah, it's kind of messed up
Interesting.
sometimes, but yeah, it's all right as long as people understand
Gotcha.
what I say. It's fine, you know.
Right, right. Yeah, no, but it's
Yeah,
interesting that your sort of terminology
yeah,
has morphed to be a little bit more Americanized given your time here.
right.
So what about you, David? What is inspiring you?
Yeah, so what's inspiring me today is 3D printing. So I've obviously started an internship. I started last week, and it's been really fun so far. And I can't say too much about the company, but basically what it does is provides like makerspace services. So 3D printing, laser cutting, CNC machines, and stuff like that. And in high school, our high school was fortunate enough to actually get a 3D printer provided to us. I think it was funded by the district, I think, but yeah, we were able to use it in engineering classes and in STEM club. And that was something that was really, really awesome, like interacting with kind of makerspace equipment early on and, picking up 3D printing skills and stuff like that for prototyping and whatnot. And now I'm glad to see that those skills that I learned haven't actually gone away. Like I'm still using my knowledge of CAD and 3D printing in my internship. So that's really exciting to me. And I guess it goes to show that what you do in high school, you should aim to make it last and aim to make it actually impact your career, because I know a lot of people do stuff in high school that they'll never actually like care about again or ever use again. So yeah, that was something that's inspiring me today.
Really nice. Very great. Yeah, I agree with what you said at the end there. A lot of times students don't really think about what they're doing in high school. They sort of just go through the motions. And unfortunately, they don't think about how the choices that they make in high school can have some pretty significant repercussions in the future, especially when you're focusing on skills, particularly with 3D printing or technical skills, but really any skill at all that you can start developing as early as you can, even in high school. That can translate to some pretty amazing skills in the future as well. The earlier you start on one skill and you develop it regularly, the better you are going to be. And I'm sure you're well aware, Sai, that skills are really just a system of time, right? You just need the
Right.
time to develop certain skills sometimes. So the earlier you can start developing a skill, the better, because then that's just more time that you've acquired to be able to learn a skill and develop a skill. So get started in high school or even earlier than that, and if you keep it up, then eventually you're going to be a master at a very, very young age in a particular skill. So glad to hear that you were able to find a skill that you kept up and now you're currently using in your internship. That's really, really nice. We had a 3D printer. I think we got the 3D printer in my year, actually, in 2016 in high school, right?
Yeah, we
I
did.
remember having the 3D printer there.
Yeah, that's when we got it. It was the MakerBot Replicator 2, I think, and yeah, Danny was the one that was really like on it, and we
Yeah.
started using it like pretty like at first I think it was sort of like a cool thing to have, and then we started really utilizing it, and I think our teacher now uses it for like all the engineering classes, which is pretty cool.
Yep. Yeah. And I think he has several 3D printers now too. It's not just one anymore. Like you
Yeah,
used to only have one. I had a couple, I
that's
think.
right. Yeah, I think there's like 3. Mhm.
Yeah, and then at NASA, in my research group at NASA, the diagnostics and prognostics group, there is one mentor in particular. He actually wasn't my mentor, but he was a mentor for another intern that I worked very closely with, and he said that he has made hiring decisions in the past where the only difference was that one student knew how to 3D print and the other didn't. So when it came down to the wire, it's that 3D printing experience that ultimately ended up hiring this student for an internship at NASA. So it's a valuable skill, and 3D printers are, oddly enough, not quite the same as a regular printer. So you need to learn the quirks of using a 3D printer, and that's a skill on its own. Okay, so I guess lastly for me, my inspiration this time is Evernote. So I think I've mentioned to some of my close friends, but not on the podcast. But I am indeed moving to Reno, Nevada in July. So that's going to be about an hour northeast of Lake Tahoe, ish. Just for geographic reference here. And it's actually not that close to Las Vegas. People think in Nevada it's like either Reno or Las Vegas, and they just happen to be close to each other, but that's actually not true. They're actually like 5-ish hours apart from each other, so not too close. Reno is in northern Nevada, and Las Vegas is in the southern part of Nevada, so that's just for geographic reference. But I'm sure you guys know moving is a pretty big project on its own. Right? A lot of things to consider, especially when you're moving with everything, right? I don't know if I don't know how much you were able to take with you, David, to your dormitories at university, but I'm having to move an entire 2-bedroom apartment here, so I'm communicating with movers. I have to coordinate with the movers to make sure that they arrive on a certain time and day and such like. I have to, I have to communicate with the new apartment, given this whole pandemic thing. I can't exactly go there to tour. And the one tool that I've been using to sort of stay organized with all the paperwork and forms and, receipts and such like, because I'm getting the move reimbursed, but in order to do so, I need to retain all of the receipts and quotes that I get from the moving expenses. So the tool that's been organizing all of this is Evernote. I don't know if I've mentioned Evernote before on the show, but Evernote is, I guess it's a notebook software, for lack of a better term, where you can store your notes, of course, typed up notes or handwritten notes. You can also scan paper and just throw it onto a note, tag it, put a title on it, and then, store it there. And whatever you need it, you can just go into Evernote and search for it. So I have everything in Evernote, like receipts, quotes, and lease forms and such like, all scanned and placed in my Evernote. And then I can just get rid of those papers. So whenever I need something, I just search for it on Evernote. And if I really need a hard copy of it, I can just print it directly from Evernote. So it has really allowed me to stay paper-free as much as possible, but still retaining that ability to have paper. And I have everything with me, so I'm not really caught by surprise when somebody asks me for a receipt or a form and I don't have it on hand. Well, there's cloud storage with Evernote, so I can log in with my phone or my tablet or laptop on Evernote, and I can view everything right then and there, which is nice. So that's what has been inspiring me today. It's just such an amazing tool to store everything and stay paper-free, but still functional. Alrighty, so let's get into the show here and into the questions. So Sai mentioned earlier, he's originally from Malaysia. So therefore that makes him an international student at San Jose State University. So let's start before university. Did you attend an international high school that is like not in the United States? Did you go to high school in the United States, or did you go to high school somewhere else, Sai?
Well, I went to high school in Malaysia. Yeah, 5 years of high school, 6 years of primary school. So we don't have elementary and middle school back home. It's a primary, secondary system, very similar to the UK. Yeah, and I did 11 years of that, all in Malaysia itself.
Gotcha.
So there is an international, there are sort of private high schools, private schools, I should say, that have international syllabus back home as well. So some of them follow the IB syllabus, International Baccalaureate, and then there are other private international schools that follow the Cambridge O levels or IGCSE syllabus, but I went to a regular public school.
Gotcha. So speaking of IB classes and such like, these are sort of like the, I mean, I like to think about IB as like the international version of the AP program that we have in the United States, right? Even though
Right.
the advanced placement program, I think, does offer exams internationally, but there was a controversy about that given the pandemic. But anyway, separate topic. But out of curiosity, did you take any of these classes, either like AP or IB, in an attempt to get college credit before going to university here?
So I did have to do something, but it wasn't AP or it wasn't IB. See, since the Malaysian public education system is not sort of recognized by American higher education, universities especially. So what I had to do was I had to enroll into a local university back home, a private university, and do some advanced courses over there. So I did calculus, international relations, sort of your English 101, 102, those kind of stuff. And then the private universities back home have some kind of relationship with some of the universities over here, San Jose State being one of them. And so what you can do is you can do 60 units back home and transfer and do 60 units over here. Or you can do 30 units back home and then do 4 years over here. So it sort of acts like a pre-university.
Ah, interesting. Pretty cool. David, you told me that you know a couple of international students. Did they talk to you about the process in high school, what classes they had to take, or what kind of hurdles they had to jump to apply to a United States university?
Yeah, so my roommate, he's originally from Korea, but he went to international school in Japan, and he did the IB program. That's what they did over there. I'm not sure how that transferred over, but from what I can tell, it was just the same as it does with like the AP exams, like whatever. I don't know what the equivalence is exactly. And then my other, my suite mate, he is from Indonesia, and he went to a international school as well. And I believe he was taking an AP route, I think, because he mentioned to me that there was no AP Calculus BC at his school. There's only AB. And so, yeah, I'm assuming that he took like an AP set of classes, and those transferred over normally as well. So, yeah, I'm fairly certain that they took a very similar route to what U.S. students just take over here.
Gotcha. So this is pretty cool. So there was a university in Malaysia that offered a sort of transfer path from the Malaysian university to San Jose State.
Yeah, there's I think 3 or 4 universities, private universities, that do that back home. Yeah. And they have like individual contracts with universities. So San Jose State was a big one because I think recently they started getting a lot of funding from the tech companies, and they started they started, I think, advertising the university as like the tech university in Silicon Valley. If you want to be a software engineer whatsoever. So San Jose State University is a big one. The Ohio State University is the other big one. And then there's like University of Michigan, University of Illinois, and others. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so I guess the next logical question is, considering that your English is excellent, I mean, it's really, really good. Did you know English before coming to the United States, and where did you acquire the language?
Right. So, I mean, I grew up in a bilingual household, so I pretty much speak English with my parents. And also, all Malaysian students that go through the public education system have to do English every year. And I mean, it's like over here, you have to do English every year as well, but that doesn't mean like all students have stellar reading, writing capabilities and whatnot. But yeah, we are just a bilingual family. We watch English news, watch English movies, read books and things like that. So yeah, it's both a mixture of the education system and just our lifestyles, really.
Gotcha. Okay. So you had a pretty close relationship with the language well before even thinking about applying to U.S. universities.
Right, right, yeah.
Okay. And I guess in applying to the U.S. universities, was that your only choice for a country, or did you also apply or think about universities in your home country as well?
Right. So I guess after high school, I sort of more or less decided that I wanted to do computer science or software engineering. So my sister was already in America, and my parents thought, it would be unfair if they sort of left me behind. And so they gave me the opportunity to sort of study abroad as well. Um, and so, besides applying to Malaysian universities, I was given a chance to either go to UK, Australia, or America. So that's quite a privilege, I would say. Not many people have, but um, based on what I wanted to do, I sort of knew that America was the place to go to, particularly Silicon Valley. Yeah. Um, but so at that time, when I was applying to come to US universities, I didn't apply to any Malaysian universities because I know that wouldn't necessarily be a hurdle. I did pretty well in high school. So I already had gotten some placements by default just based on my results from high school into pretty good public universities back home. But we decided to sort of explore this route. Yeah.
Gotcha. So UK and Australia were in consideration as well, but given
Yeah.
your choice of career, the United States stood out as the main choice there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I
Okay.
didn't even bother applying to Australia or UK universities.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But I think those would be pretty cool choices in terms of an international education as well.
Right.
That'd be pretty cool to do. So applying to university in the United States, it's a process that a lot of high school students, it's an exciting time for high school seniors, that being 12th graders in the United States. I don't know if you're familiar, Sai, but the students, high school students, usually they typically start applying for university in their last year of high school. I mean, of course, they take all of the requisite exams, like standardized exams, like the SAT or ACT. They take a variety of different AP exams or IB exams. They take a bunch of exams. That's just sort of the thing that you do in high school. And that happens typically in your junior year, I'd say. And then in your senior year, you're sort of finishing up high school at this point. You're applying to all these universities, and it's a fairly hectic time because all of the applications tend to be due around the same time. I want to say traditionally around November or December or January is when all the applications are due. David, check me on that. But San Jose State applications were due, I believe, in November or December, something like that.
I think the UC applications were due by the end of November, and the Cal State ones were due by the end of October. I'm not 100% sure. This was a while ago, but and then for private universities, they're usually grouped around the beginning of January. At least that's what it was for me. So
Gotcha.
It's pretty much like a month gap in between each like application cycle for me. But yeah.
Right. And if you're the kind of student that are, you take a lot of advanced placement classes, a lot of high level classes in your last year of high school, this is, if you're paying attention to all the months here, that falls into the fall. And it's usually your first semester, your first quarter in high school. So you're focusing on writing all of these essays, putting together all these applications for all of your universities in the fall, typically towards the beginning of your last year of high school. And if you're taking all these advanced courses, you're sort of juggling all of these college applications and then keeping up with your classes at the same time, because those don't slow down, just because there's applications due for high school, right? So it's a hectic time, lots of students scuttling about trying to get together put together their applications and such like. So so what was the process for applying to San Jose State like for you, and how was it different from our way of applying to university?
Right. So I just a bit on like the whole application process. I think when it comes to applying to US universities as opposed to say like UK or Australia, UK and Australia is standardized. It's pretty much one application. I'm not too sure about Australia, but in UK, I know it's one application for all schools, and they call it the UCAS system. So it's very similar to the Common App over here. It's one university, I mean, one application that covers many schools. But the thing about applying to US universities, it can get pretty overwhelming because, like I said, it's not a standardized application. Some universities require, I mean, each university have their own set of requirements. So like the UC system, they have a different set of essays. Those schools that go through the Common App, they have a different set of essays. And depending on the university as well, because you're an international student, they sometimes want different types of documentations for your application process. So I remember some of the universities that went through the Common App, they were fine with me having a Malaysian public high school certificate. But I know like San Jose State, Cal Poly, and Ohio State required me to get an accreditation from a third party. So I had to send in my results and that to a third party, and they would verify saying like, yeah, these results are legitimate, and this, getting these results translates to a 4.0 or something like that. And so that itself took some time. So with applying to US universities, I guess you have, like what Julian said, you have to start early, and you just have to be on top of what each university wants. And something that really helped me was also directly contacting the university by email. They'll just tell you what you want, I mean, what they want from you. And because the other thing is their websites are sometimes not the most updated. For each different country, they have their own set of requirements. So it's always good to just double check and email and ask the international counselor, because then they can tell what's the most updated thing they want, and there wouldn't be any hurdles or whatsoever in your application process. But for applying to San Jose State, so for an international student, the only sort of standardized testing they required was the TOEFL, which is a exam to test your proficiency in English. I think in general, all universities require this from international students that come from countries where English is not their main language. So I had to do that, and then just for good measures, I also did the SAT, and then I did the subject test for math and physics, just to sort of strengthen my application. Although San Jose State didn't require that. Yeah, I think those were it. Yeah, everything else is pretty much just filling in the online application and getting your transcripts ready and things like that.
Okay, so a lot to unpack there. So so first of all, you needed to send in your academic records to a third party to validate those records and I guess translate them to equivalent numbers for the United States. Is that right?
Yeah, or just not necessarily translating them, but it's sort of saying like this result is legitimate, and if this was the U.S. education system, it would be a 4.0 or a 3.5 or something along those lines. Not it wouldn't be like subject to subject conversion.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the process after that, after you get all of that in, seems pretty
Right.
standard to universities. Unfortunately, we're not like the UK where all the colleges are connected to a single application. I wish that was the case, but it isn't. We have to apply to, depending on the university, we have to apply in different ways. So the San Jose State University falls into the Cal State system, the California State University system. So that's one application that you need to submit for that system. And then there's the UCs, which is the University of California system. It's confusing, I know, but we have two university systems in California. And that's its own application as well. And David, I don't know, because they changed the application since my time, and I don't know if they changed it for you. They might have changed it for. Oh no, they definitely did change it for you, because they changed it the year after mine. I think the questions changed around. Were the application questions different depending on the university in the UC system, or were they all still the same?
Yeah, they were also the same. So we had personal insight questions, and we had to complete 4. I think there was a list, and they had like, I think it was 10 that they listed from what I can recall. And you just chose 4 and you wrote about those, and each one was like 350 words or something like that. But yeah, you sent all your applications to this. I mean, you sent your one application to all the colleges, so you didn't have to do it like 5 times or whatever.
Gotcha. So just copy and paste, send it
Yeah.
to but you still needed to send it to each UC that you wanted to go to.
Yeah. But it was
Gotcha.
fairly simple. Yeah, same application.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we do have the Common App, which I understand a lot of typically private universities subscribe to.
My God, the Common App.
I had to fill out the Common App for Stanford University and Santa Clara University, because those are 2 private universities in the Bay Area. So 2 Common Apps on that side. I don't recall the questions being very different between the 2 Common Apps. I think it's been so long. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a general Common App, right? And then after that, there's different questions depending on the university at the very end of the application, correct?
Yes, correct. Each university has its own like little supplements, and you fill those out. Well, some of them are very easy supplements, and some of them are ridiculously long, and it takes you like forever. But yeah.
So that's, you still have to choose a university to which you are applying in that case. So so what Sai mentioned earlier, I think matches pretty closely. You still have to like look at each individual university that you're applying to make sure that you have everything that you need to fill out the application. So that seems pretty close. Now, one thing that I did find interesting was the SATs. So you mentioned that the SATs were not a requirement for applying to United States universities. Is that right?
No, so
or at least it's San Jose State.
San Jose State, yeah, and I think a couple of state schools didn't require it.
Interesting. I would have loved.
It didn't require also. I think Cal Poly did. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah, it would have been nice to get out of the SAT for applying to universities. I know, given the pandemic, that's sort of in contention now, whether or not universities will accept standardized test scores for this class. So now let's cut to, okay, so you've applied to university. It's generally the same sort of steps that you take for a United States, domestic student. You just have to apply to each school and make sure that you have all the paperwork. It's a confusing process for anybody. I would say it's not extremely straightforward. So I don't imagine it being any more or less difficult for an international student. I guess the only barrier would be the language. If you're not extremely familiar with the language like Sai is, it might be more difficult to navigate what exactly the requirements are for each application. But given that you're very familiar with the language already, it's no more or less confusing and weird that the application processes for universities here in the U.S. So now let's cut to getting to university. You're at university, you're studying, you're going to class. Are there any aspects, or were there any aspects of an American university that put you at a disadvantage, you'd say, in comparison to domestic students?
Not really. I think what you said earlier, language, it didn't really affect me that much. So I think, like, I would assume for an international student that doesn't speak English, it would be really hard for them to get used to the culture around, or just get used to life in a different country. But I think for me, that wasn't a problem at all. So there wasn't really any problems actually when it came to like a university environment. In fact, I think like universities, they go above and beyond to have an inclusive environment, irrespective of race, gender, and nationality and whatnot. So yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, there wasn't. At least I didn't feel there was an advantage when it came to college life.
Gotcha. I mean, given that, you're in the Bay Area, a lot of our professors are international anyway. So
Right.
you're not exactly being taught by Americans, the entire 4 years, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I
I
think,
guess like some of the things like having a car, maybe that might be a disadvantage to some people. If let's say you're going to school in Michigan, in the middle of nowhere. I know some of my Malaysian friends, they have problems doing groceries and whatnot, but San Jose State is like a city campus.
Mhm.
Yeah, so maybe in terms of academics and in terms of the university itself, I don't think there's too much. But I think life beyond that, sure, there might be certain disadvantages or certain hurdles, I would say. But it's all, you can overcome almost all of them, I would say.
Gotcha. And so
Yeah.
describe some of those hurdles. Do you have troubles finding a place to stay, for example, or any other hurdles that you had to jump through outside of university just to get adjusted to life here?
Right. Yeah. So place to stay is actually a good one because on-campus housing can get really expensive.
Oh yeah.
And there's some things I would say an international student needs to get educated on, like how housing works over here. And uh, so when I was looking for a house, you can either sublet, be a sublease, uh, lease on somebody else's. So you can either rent a room in someone
Right.
else's house, or you can either lease the whole building and then, lease the whole space and then sublease out each room.
Right.
And so for international students, I say you have to be very careful in and know what you're getting into when you're just leasing a room, or you're leasing a space and renting out rooms, because there's eventually more responsibility on the latter when you get a unit and then you sublease out rooms. If anything goes wrong with one of your sublets, you will be responsible, and um, it's really up to you whether you want to take up that responsibility while you're a student. Sometimes it can get pretty expensive as well if there's any damages done by your subletters. Um, but leasing a room would be the most convenient thing to do, because then you're just dealing with the person who's leasing directly. You're not responsible for anyone else. So that was quite a, like, just going through the motions with that. I had a couple of Malaysian friends that wanted to get a unit together, but I wasn't too confident with them. I wasn't really trusting of them. Um, so I decided to just go and get a room, and I was fortunate enough to get a really cheap room in San Jose. Um, so that was, at least in terms of finding boarding. But anything else? Yeah, I think besides that, not so much. I think getting a room and moving is the big one. If you have friends, it shouldn't be so much of a problem. But I think people should do a bit of research into how the leasing system works over here.
Yeah. So I know that when I was looking for my apartment, I needed to have, there were background checks, credit checks, right? And I was applying to apartments where, I was applying with my partner. So both of us needed to be on the lease, and both of us needed to make sure that we had enough income to support the apartment, to qualify for the apartment. So how did that work out for you being an international student? How did the background checks work? How did the credit checks work? Or did you
Right.
not have to go through that at all?
Right. So background check and credit check, uh, essentially, well, I had to go through a background check, but a credit check wasn't required because like I said, I leased a room directly from my landlord. So everything he could deal with me, uh, personally, one to one. If he wants me out, he can directly tell me. So I guess that's why it was not required in this case.
Mm-hmm.
But I've had some friends who got a unit, and then they didn't do a background check on this one guy that they were renting their room out to, and he turned out to be a ex-convict. So so if you're in the position where you're planning to let go of some rooms, you might want to incorporate background checks and credit checks and things like that. And that was one of the other reason why I didn't decide to go with um, getting a unit, because of all the bureaucracy that comes with that. When you're an international student, you need to first of all find someone with a credit score, and we had someone already, so uh, that was fine. But then when it comes to subleasing the rooms, they sort of wanted to do it in an under the table manner, so not effectively reporting to the landlord that they were going to sublease out the rooms and things like that. So, as an international student, sometimes if you go against the law, you can get your hands in a lot of trouble. So, yeah, uh, it's definitely something to be aware about. But for me, yeah, I sort of intentionally wanted to do things on my own, so I didn't go for like the collective effort. And I was fortunate enough where I found my landlord didn't require a credit score, just a background check was sufficient. But yeah, I had to like prove my financials and show him like I had enough money in the bank and things like that.
So that's one thing that I want to drill into here. So how did the
Yeah.
financials work? Did you have help from your family? Did you have to find a job to support yourself while going through university? How did that go?
Right. So I'm fully funded by my parents. Yeah, it's a privilege essentially. I did get a job for a bit during my second year. I worked in the student union as they call it as a building assistant, but it's essentially a janitorial job. So you go around and cleaning the building, wiping tables, mopping floors, and things like that. Uh, So the reason why I got a job was because if you get a job in America, you get a social security number. There's no other way you can get a social security number. And the reason why I wanted a social security number is because then you can apply for US credit cards and then you can start building up your credit score. So I sort of worked backwards. So I managed to get a room first and then managed to get a credit score as opposed to doing the other way around. Um, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that pretty much answers my question.
Right.
I know that for international students here, money's pretty tight. I mean, in the Bay Area as well, it's very expensive just to live in the Bay Area. So for a student, you're a student, right? You're supposed to be focusing on yourself. So living in the Bay Area, but you're just going to school, you don't really have those cushy six-figure jobs quite yet to be able to support yourself in the Bay Area. So I was just curious about how the financials worked out as a student. I know for me, my family did help me pay to a small extent. I didn't come from a very affluent family at all. So I depended on financial aid from the federal government. I also depended on loans. So that's where a lot of my money came from. And then like you, I also got a job at the university, not at the student union, but I got a job at the university library. So I worked there for about a year, maybe a year and a half. Yeah, it was actually a year and a half, and then I got an internship at NASA, which paid. I guess it paid better than the college job, the library job, but that was only for like a short amount of time. And then after that, it was my last year of university. I wanted to focus on the grades, so I didn't really get another job outside of that. So that last year was fairly challenging to get the budget just right, so that I don't. I don't get into a deficit with all of my finance, but I pulled through and then moved to LA, and now I have a job. So luckily I can sustain myself, but yeah, that pretty much answers my question.
I guess I got an internship as well. I forgot about that. But
oh yeah, did that pay?
Yeah, it paid a lot actually. I guess the benefit of getting a job for me both times when I worked on campus and the internship was pretty much to cover food. Because boarding and college tuition was pretty much covered for my parents, and with the extra money I earned instead of shopping for food and doing my own groceries and cooking, I could just eat out every day. And I guess that freed up a lot of time to do other things for me.
Yeah.
I do find cooking a little bit of a burden, so yeah. So that was the advantage, I guess, of working on campus as well.
I just want to chime in here. I know that from what I can tell, international students do not receive any federal financial aid, right? Is that?
Yeah, we can't apply for any.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely tough. I know, my roommate and my suite mate, they both pretty much pay full tuition. And from what I can tell, the universities themselves don't actually do anything to alleviate that, because I'm not sure why they don't. Like, even for private universities, they don't like actually chip in and give you grants, because obviously they're not, federally funded like public universities are. But that's just something that's little, I don't know, it's a little off-putting. Like, if I were an international student, I would have reservations about going to a US university because of that.
So
in many cases, the fees are actually higher for international students, right?
Yeah, they are.
Right. To universities providing aid. Some universities do. So with some private universities where their alumni has a lot of international students or people coming from other countries, they sometimes set up funds just for international students. So I know UC Berkeley has, I think, 2 or 3 different scholarships just for international students. But that again is another application process. So you can't really depend on that so much to alleviate your tuition fees. But some universities, I think like Harvard and MIT, the Ivy Leagues, the top private institutions, they do provide the need-based and need-blind um, financial aid. So if you're struggling, so they'll just accept you regardless of your financial standings, and then based on that, they will provide aid necessary respectively if you require it or not. And
Gotcha.
I think there is a different program as well for international students and going through the government, where you get a permit to work off campus, because off campus jobs generally pay a bit more, but for that you need to prove like you are in no way able to support yourself and you need to work. So yeah, I'm not too familiar with how that works, but yeah, I know seeing an advertisement for it in the international student office.
So, out of curiosity, were the fees
Yeah.
higher for San Jose State University being an international student?
Yeah, it is. It's how much do you pay per semester, or how much did you pay approximately?
Oh, I don't remember specifically because I did financial aid that covered tuition. The loans were used
Right.
for room and board and food. So
Okay.
I want to
So if
say
I'm not
like
mistaken,
I want to say around the realm of like 2,700 ish, like 3,000 per semester maybe.
okay, and that's without financial aid, right?
So I think the financial aid covered that part of the tuition.
Okay.
I'm saying
So
like tuition costs for a semester was about 3,000 for me.
okay, so for international students, it's anywhere between 12,000 to 15,000.
Oh, yeesh.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's really high.
It depends on the courses, it depends on the subject. So if you're a science major, um, specifically if you're doing like life sciences or physical sciences and there's lab components to your classes, that could possibly go up to 17,000 because you have to pay extra for labs. But since I didn't really have that many lab or classes that require labs, yeah, it was
Mhm.
approximately 12,000. Yeah, the semesters that I did physics and that had a lab component to that, it went up to 15,000.
Yikes. Wow. Yeah, I just did a quick Google search here. The in-state tuition, in-state being students who are from California, they paid 7,796 for the year, and then
Right,
out-of-state tuition was $19,600
right.
for out-of-state. I don't know if out-of-state is the same as international,
I think
but
it's the same.
the figure that you gave,
Oh wait,
yeah,
I
the
think
figure
it
you
might be
gave.
more actually. I don't know.
Yeah, but in any case, we know that it's just expensive. It's more expensive than
Right.
native students from California, right?
Yeah.
So obviously you talked a lot about like the education and financial aspects of everything, but how hard was it for you to adjust to American culture? Like what would you say is the hardest thing that you had to adjust to in America?
So in terms of lifestyle, I think wasn't it wasn't too much adapting. I mean, I'm pretty westernized as well, so it wasn't too much. But I'd say the thing that shocked me the most was um, guns and weed. Uh, I think when I first came here, I think America was in the process of legalizing marijuana, or at least in California. And back home, it's still a federal offense, and I didn't know anyone who had done any weed at all. And when I came over here, it was just so common. You go to house parties, and people would be smoking in the backyard. Um, you know, it's in my mind, it's like a heavy drug, and people is using it without any fear. It was quite something to wrap my head around. And then the other one was guns. Yeah. So uh, in Malaysia, there's no guns at all. No one's allowed to have guns, not even for hunting or whatsoever. And so for my first Thanksgiving, uh, not Thanksgiving, for my first spring break, my friend decided to take me to his house in LA, and we went shooting. That was a whole experience. But in general, guns really freak me out because the fact that someone else can just take your life, it's still pretty scary. And I know you have to carry your weapon in a concealed way everywhere you go, especially in the city. But the fact that someone could have a gun in the glove compartment, and if you piss them off somehow, he can just shoot you. And yeah, so that whole thing was really scary, and going shooting was yeah, an experience of its own. I guess that's about it. Those two things made a huge impression on me, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. See, I think, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Julian, but we as Americans, for the most part, like aside from, I think, I don't know, we're very we're a very individualistic country, and I think my roommates always talk to me about this, and they say that America is given, like, American citizens are given a lot of liberty over their own lives, whereas in countries like
Right.
Japan and Korea, everybody's a lot more collective, and there are definitely a lot of good things and bad things about both. I think at least that's what my roommates mention. Because no, it's definitely interesting. America is one of the very few countries, I was surprised to find out, that actually like guarantees free speech as a right in the law, in the Constitution, whereas a lot of countries, it's kind of like, it's a privilege more or less. At any time when you say something wrong, the government can kind of come down on you. So I think growing
Right.
up in America, that's sort of stuff like guns and weed, like being able to do that
Yeah.
freely without worrying, sort of natural to us. But then I feel like it definitely does freak out a lot of people from other countries.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I guess going on that as well,
yeah,
I guess it's something that I didn't realize till you mentioned is like people over here are generally more opinionated as well.
definitely.
Yeah, it's something I sort of appreciate at certain times, and like you said, it can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing, but yeah, that's something else as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
I grew up in a household where I was kind of taught to if you didn't have anything nice to say, don't say it. So I grew up acquiring a filter. I will say that the United States does have a freaky obsession over guns, and I don't really quite
Right.
understand guns and the whole obsession around it with American culture, but it's definitely something that I have not seen
Have you
in
done
other
shooting,
countries.
Julian?
Shooting, but just owning a gun in general. There's like a huge thing about owning a gun and being
Yeah.
able to own a gun. People are just
Yeah.
they feel very strongly about
Right.
the ability, the right to own a gun. I don't really quite understand
Right.
the reasoning behind it. Like,
I'll
if
chime in. I mean, the idea is, I'm going to be very unbiased about this. I do have an opinion on this, but I'll be very unbiased about this. The perspective is that a lot of libertarians and conservatives believe is that the reason why we have guns is, aside from hunting and shooting and self-defense, is because of tyranny. So the idea is that if one day the government decides that they're going to start becoming totalitarian, we have guns to fight back. Now, whether or not you think this is actually like a valid argument is another issue entirely.
yeah,
But yeah, that's the idea, because I think America was founded from a revolution, unlike many countries, and because of that, I think much of our beliefs are rooted in like liberty, and so the idea is that if we want true liberty, we need to be able to revolt against our own government, similar to how the founders revolted against the United Kingdom or Britain at the time. But yeah, that's the idea behind it. Whether or not you agree with that argument or not is a whole different issue. But yeah,
That's actually the first time I've ever heard that side of the story.
I think.
really. Oh well, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the most common thing.
Right. Yeah. So the other thing I realized is like those who are born today that grew up with guns in their home, they sort of for them it's something that brings them a lot of memories among the family. They go shooting recreationally, so there's a lot of memories and there's a lot of sentiments within that itself. So for me, it's like someone that says, "Oh, I can't eat rice anymore." It's that kind of, it has that kind of effect when you tell someone who's grown up with guns, saying you can't have your guns anymore. That's one thing I realized when I went shooting with my friend and his family. It has such sentimental value to them.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think that's definitely guns are a big part of American culture, especially in many states. And I mean, I personally don't understand it because I was never born into it. Julian, you can probably agree with that because we're Asian and we're in California, where not many people
Right.
are too big on guns. But I know in a lot of states, like it's a huge thing. So fun question before we move on to another serious kind of topic. What is your favorite American food that you've had here so far? Just curious.
So I never had pork, or steak back home. We don't really eat beef. I mean, we don't really eat pork. Uh, we only eat like chicken and seafood back home at least. Um, so having ribs for the first time was definitely an experience, and bacon, I would say I kind of like. Pokey was the other one. I think Pokey came to Malaysia only like 2 years ago, so that was after I was here already. Uh, but yeah, I would say bacon, ribs, um, Pokey, yeah, anything meat really. It's something that I'm not very used to. Uh, but yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think
love
those three things.
ribs. Oh my god, I love ribs so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't get to me immediately for the first time. It felt kind of overwhelming,
Hmm.
but after that, it was pretty. I would say it's something that I look forward to.
Yeah, for sure. So
Actually, I want to jump in here on the subject of meat. I know that ribs are huge. It's the United States is a huge meat eating population, but growing up, I never really. I mean, of course I had meat, but I sort of and both of you chime in here if you share the same sentiment, but I always saw meat as something that you ate in combination with something else. I never really, unlike Americans who sort of can just eat a piece of meat as their full meal, I never could do that. I never enjoyed like a steak where all I was eating was the meat. If I were having meat, I would like to have it with something else like another side or small pieces of meat with rice or something like that. I could never just get full off of one huge piece of meat. And so ribs, not something that I ate every single day. Steak, not particularly into it just because it's a huge thing of meat. Of course I can eat it and I will enjoy it, but I won't go out of my way to choose that if I could get something more that I'm familiar with, which is just pieces of meat with a side and rice or something like that. So I don't know if Sai, do you feel the same way with meat too, or is it just because you just in general the culture just does not eat a lot of meat in that way?
Yeah, I think that back home we always have like rice, protein, so carbs, veggies, and some kind of protein. So meat is never really the center of any dish. Yeah,
Right.
but I said growing up, like we did have exposure to like Western food and things like that, so fish and chips, lamb chops. Back home, there's this thing called chicken chop, but it's just like fish and chips, but with chicken. Um,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, so that sort of introduced us to just meat being the main, but yeah, majority it's just carbs as your main, and
Right.
then protein as a side.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. See, I grew up in a family where like we were used to eating meat with rice. Like it was always it was kind of rice with everything, but we always had to eat meat with something else. But then I started growing up and I was like, oh, we can eat steak like without any rice. Like this is great because I love meat and I hate carbs. You probably call me a fake Asian for this, but I hate rice. Like it's never been my thing. But I have to eat it. And looking back on it, it's probably not good for my health that I only like ate meat because I actually have high cholesterol. It's sort of a genetic thing, but yeah, it's really bad. It's definitely a habit I need to kick. I should probably adapt to the Asian way so I can keep my health up.
Yeah, it's not something that I really got into to this day. Actually, some one place where I do eat just meat is Korean barbecue. I actually never go for the rice at a Korean barbecue place, which is funny. Now, aside from that, though, I will need to eat. I mean, it doesn't have to be rice, but it could be, like it's meat and then a significant portion of vegetables. Yes, I will do that. Like I will eat like pieces of meat with half of the plate being vegetables. I will do that. But I can't do the a single plate with one big piece of steak and the only vegetable I see is the parsley that they used for garnish. Can't do that. Sorry.
Okay, so on to a question that's a little more on track, but how is job searching different for international students looking for internship or new grad positions in the US?
Right. I think in general, it's gotten a little bit more harder over the past 4 years. I think since the Trump administration, because his policies were promoting sort of jobs for Americans. So in terms of like the number of work visas that he introduced, or his administration sort of approved, were significantly lesser compared to the Obama administration. So over the years, it has been getting increasingly sort of harder, and companies are sort of afraid to take risk by hiring international students because the when you apply for an internship, the goal is to um, translate that internship into a full-time offer. So now when they can't hire international students, you know, they've tested you, say, for the internship period, but they can't take the risk of hiring you full time. So they are more likely to go with Americans. So when you're searching for internships, uh, most of the time you have to look for companies that are willing to sort of sponsor you in the future if they would like to hire you full time, whether it's for internships or for full time jobs. And these companies are usually the bigger ones, so your Google, Microsoft, Facebooks, um, or any of the top consulting companies, um, things like that. Uh, but yeah, in terms of application process, there's nothing really different compared to an American. But just being aware of say the climate, uh, political climate, I would say helps a lot. Um, so that it's really a heads up for you, or for whomever that's applying. So if it's hard to get an internship, don't beat yourself down because say you're not worthy, but it's just the nature of the situation around things.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, obviously Julian and I are U.S. citizens, and I don't really like take into account this sort of like political climate or anything when we're applying to jobs, because
Right.
I'd say for U.S. citizens, it's you don't have any barriers to get a job aside from your actual skills and whatever. But like that's never really an issue.
Mhm.
But coming as the reason why I asked this question is someone coming from the electrical engineering field. I know a lot of people who are internationals, and they've struggled to get internships and jobs because
Yeah.
many of the electrical engineering jobs are in the military industrial complex, and that means that you have to get a security clearance. And a lot of the times you have to be a U.S. citizen. There's no option for
Right.
people with visas to actually get jobs. So that's definitely an issue, I think, for a lot of international students, not just in the defense industry, but just any governmental work in general. I know that I think the NSA came to my university to do recruiting, and my friend, who is an applied math major from Korea, he basically just got rejected on the spot. They were like, "Oh, are you a U.S. citizen, by the way?" And he said, "No, I'm international." And they were just like, "Oh, so you can't actually apply." Well, which is
Yeah.
kind of devastating because it sounded like a good opportunity. But yeah, I don't think it's
Right.
something that people take into account a lot. I know a
So
lot
I
of
have a similar experience that I can share
yeah, sure,
about getting rejected on the spot.
yeah,
So I applied for an internship to Western Digital. They make hardware storage devices, and so they had they recruited me from the university career fair, and they brought me on site. And so I had like 4 rounds of interviews, and in my final round I was talking to the person interviewing was the manager, so he was the one that's going to make the decision. And so he spoke to me, he saw my resume, and said, like, you seem like a very good candidate. The previous interviewers, they really liked you. And then he sort of asked me, where did I go for high school? And then I said, oh, I'm from Malaysia. Then he was like, wait, I thought you were a US citizen. And I was like, no, I'm an international student. And then he was like, okay, I think that's going to be a problem, because HR will not allow me to take you because you're not a citizen. And then he immediately called on HR, and on the spot I was like, yeah, sorry, we can't really move on with you. And the manager's like really apologizes, like, if it was up to me, I would just take you, but HR will definitely not allow me. So yeah, pretty heartbreaking.
that really sucks to hear. Yeah, I know it's getting rejected on the spot like that, and not really having any
Yeah,
way to go through that. Yeah, that's
yeah,
unfortunate. That's a
yeah.
problem for
But I would
many.
say, like,
Mhm. Yeah.
for an international student, if you're a STEM major, so science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, you have some advantages, because upon graduation, you can extend your student visa for 3 more years. So you can stay here for 3 more years, upon getting a full-time offer. But if, let's say, you were an arts or humanities major, um, you can only work here for 1 year, and then under your student visa. And after that, it depends on whether you manage to successfully obtain a H-1B visa. And it's a little hard to get that, especially nowadays. So I would say chances are, if you're a STEM major, there's sort of more opportunities for you for getting a full-time job in America.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. Julian, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, it's pretty tough to apply to a job, get to the last gate, right, and then just to be thrown off just for something that could easily have saved you all that time and effort at the beginning if somebody just paid attention, right?
Yeah,
That really just blows. There's really nothing more that we can say about that. And so, out of curiosity, was that role like sensitive? Like, were you dealing with sensitive information at all, or was it just something that the company just did not want to hire internationally?
No, it was not sensitive at all. It was uh, just a regular software engineering position, but for that position, you would, you know, majority of their new grad hires come from that position. So
Mm.
yeah, and almost all of the students were all of their hires for that particular position were U.S. citizens. Um, yeah. The thing is, I'm an undergraduate, right? So for undergraduates, getting a if you graduate as a master student, the chances that you'll be given a H-1B visa is much more higher. So for that role, they were hiring international students who were pursuing their master's degree, but they weren't
Mm.
hiring international students that were pursuing the undergraduate degree because um, applying for a H-1B visa it's an almost reject unless you are really, really exceptional.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's definitely tough. Every time I'm applying to like a new role or I'm looking into a new role, one of the first questions I get is like, are you a US citizen, or are you or do we have to um, give verification that you are allowed to work in the United States? It's like it's one of those questions every single time with every single application that I've turned in. That's one of the first things. Curious if that sort of slipped through the cracks, and then you got through all of those rounds, and then only to find out
Right.
at the very end that they weren't looking for international students. That just really blows.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. I think is it like that bad in computer science? Because I know in EE it's really it's a really big problem. But is it as bad for computer science? Because I know there's a lot of consumer companies that I'm sure wouldn't really care about your citizenship.
I would say in computer science, it's definitely not as bad as electrical engineering, or in fact, the other engineering.
Yeah.
In fact, I have a lot of friends who do other engineerings, but when they are doing an internship, they end up doing something like data science or project management in tech companies because they are the ones that sort of don't really care. Um, but yeah, being a CS student definitely has a lot more privilege, I would say, in this sense.
Yeah, for sure. And final question, do you plan on staying in the US and getting a full-time job here, or are you gonna move back to your home country and try to get a job there?
Yeah, so I guess one of the main reasons why I wanted to come to America, besides for being one of the best countries to offer a computer science education, was to actually spend some time working in Silicon Valley itself. I would say it's been my dream since like I was 15, 16 years old. So I'm really pushing for that and really try to work here for 3 to 4 years. Um, like I said, if you're a STEM major, you can stay here for 3 years with your student visa. So I'm trying to go with that route and then move to either Malaysia or to Singapore because it's quite easy for me to get jobs in Singapore as well, being a Malaysian citizen. So yeah, but I would say in the long term, I would want to move back because most of my family is still back home.
Yeah, that's definitely pretty interesting. I mean, I think it's always great. This is just my opinion, obviously. I don't, I'm not an economist or anything, but I always think it's really great when people, like study and work for a little bit in the US and then go back to their home country. Because I think I think it allows for a lot more opportunity in other countries. I know that there are a lot of people, there are a lot of stories of people who, you know, studied in Silicon Valley, maybe worked here for a bit and then went back to their home countries and started companies. And that's really what causes economic growth. Like I said, this is just my opinion, like just looking at it from my perspective. I'm not an economist, so I actually don't know the numbers behind this sort of stuff. But yeah, it's definitely very interesting. I mean, I definitely want to return to my home country too. Unless of course I really like the US, but obviously I haven't lived in another country, so I can't really tell.
I mean, Sai also did pay for his education here, so I think by all means he should be able to take that and then you know, go back if he wants to, right? Or stay here, whatever he wants.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially when he's paying so much more than in-state students.
Oh yeah, dude, it's really bad. If you think it's bad for you know, SGSU, man, it's terrible for Hopkins. Like, imagine paying full tuition.
I think in Hopkins, I think it goes up to like 60,000 a semester. I mean a year. Sorry,
70. I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it ends up being. It's ridiculous. I mean, I can't stand the thought of having to pay like full tuition. That's just not. Yeah. But hey, if you think your education was valuable here and you can definitely do things with it, then I'd say it's worth it, right? I mean, Julian, would you agree?
Oh yeah, I would totally agree. I mean, I grew up in Southern California in a community where everybody's expectation was you were going to UCI, you were going to UCLA, you were going to Cal State Long Beach, Cal State Fullerton, or whatever university was in Southern California. Like everybody who, in general, graduated from our high school, David, pretty much went to those universities, right? Would you agree?
Oh yeah. Dude, it's a phenomenon, and I don't think people who are not from Southern California can understand it, but it's like we love staying in Southern California, and I don't blame them. I like Southern California, don't get me wrong, but there's just so much more to see out there in the world. I mean, being to Baltimore is like, it's pretty eye-opening, right? Because you get to see a whole new environment and a whole new culture, and you get to see like really how much you can impact your community. Because I correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm like pretty sure that most people who end up staying in Orange County don't do like bold things. You know, they don't. Maybe that's changing, but from what I've seen, it's like, okay, you go to this school and then you major in this and you become a doctor. That's the joke I always make with my friends. Like, you get a biochem degree from UCI and then you become a doctor and then you just work as a doctor for the rest of your life, and you know, hopefully you'll be happy and be rich by retirement. That's a stereotype.
Yeah, that's the pinnacle goal, I think, for a lot of families in Orange County. Which I mean, you know, props to them if that's the path that they choose. But for me, location of my university was a huge factor in the choice of schools that I applied to. So I mentioned this on an episode before, that I chose to apply only to Northern California schools. I didn't apply to any Southern California schools, much to my mother's demise. She expressed a lot of discontent, and we had a lot of disagreements when I was a senior in high school about my choice to apply only to Northern California schools. It was a pretty tough time actually for me to wrap my head around everything, but I applied to only Northern California schools. And why is that? I wanted an education that was surrounded by all of these amazing tech companies. You know, I was going for a tech degree. It made sense for me to get an education surrounded by all these tech companies. And, you know, I'm sure you're well aware, David, the only tech companies around Southern California and Orange County just are related to defense. Right? It's you've got Raytheon, you've got SpaceX is in Hawthorne, you've got aerospace, you know, a bunch of defense companies here in Southern California, but not that many like tech startups that aren't defense in Orange County. Perhaps there's, you know, I know that there's a Google office in Irvine, Amazon, there's an office there as well. And I know in Los Angeles there's this notion of a Silicon Beach. There's Google, Facebook, Snapchat is there as well. But that's LA, not Orange County, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't want to be limited to that. I wanted the very healthy startup community in the Bay Area, and that's largely the reason why I only applied to Bay Area universities. So Stanford, I think the Stanford, Santa Clara, UC Santa Cruz, and San Jose State. San Jose State honestly should be a UC on its own, to be entirely honest, but that's a topic for another episode. I think the only university that I would say is like far off from the healthy startup culture of Silicon Valley, I think, is UC Santa Cruz. I think that's like the furthest one that I applied to. UC Berkeley is fairly far away too, but it's on the other side of the bay. So I guess you can just take a bridge over to San Francisco if you wanted to. But yeah, I chose San Jose State for a reason. It's just smack dab right in the middle of all of that. And I have to say, I'm really glad for my choice. I got the education I wanted. I got the opportunities that I wanted. I was surrounded by all these amazing companies. Just to be surrounded by them just inspired me to do better and focus more on my technical skills overall. I was like, aside from school, just like being surrounded by all these companies and all these professionals, they're just talking about skills, learn this, learn that. And it motivated me to learn these different skills, and I think that was valuable, and it's all due to the location of the school.
Yeah, no, I definitely 100% agree with you. Location is super important. And people, I mean, let's be real here, like 99% of people who went to our high school went to colleges that were in Southern California, and there was no good justification for going there besides like, oh, it's close to home and I can commute. I mean, to be fair, it does cut costs if you commute, I think, comparing to dorming. Yeah, but aside from that, I think a big part of it is, being close to your parents and being close to home and not really escaping the culture. Because what they like to call UCI the natural extension of our high school. And they're not wrong. It's definitely like that's definitely what it is. I mean, you see lots of Asians and what's it called? You will end up seeing like a lot of the same people that went to schools like in our district and close to it. And yeah, there's not a huge difference. But no, I definitely recommend anybody who's interested or like merely is trying to explore the idea of going to an out-of-state university or somewhere that's not, where they grew up, definitely try it. Like it's a new experience, and I think it's a one-time experience, because I don't think you can go to college, a second time. But yeah,
and by no means is UCI a bad school.
No, it's not. Yeah, school. It's not. Yeah.
The only thing that sort of forced me to pick a different school. I mean, actually, if you go back far enough, UCI was my dream school. In fact, but just due to additional research and looking into what I wanted in my education, UCI was just not the optimal choice anymore. For the reasons that I spoke of before. It just was not surrounded by enough tech companies. It wasn't in the Bay Area. And I personally think it's super valuable to move away from your childhood home and go somewhere else and live on your own, because at that point it forces you to be independent. In Sai's case, he moved to an entirely different country. I just moved upstate, and then you moved across the country, right? So we all moved away, and I think that taught us a lot about how to fend for ourselves, how to live on our own, how to live apart from that family support, which is nice. And it's great. And I would appreciate family support, but the reality is that they're not going to be there forever. And at some point in our lives, we have to figure it out, like figure all that stuff out on our own. And there's no better time than college, where you're really learning about yourself, you're discovering yourself, and you're learning all these skills at the same time. You might as well pick up how to be an independent adult at that point as well.
Yeah, I I just wanted to mention, I mean, speaking of location and moving to different locations, I mean, Sai, you're the one who has moved the furthest out of the three of us, and like that must have been an experience for you. I mean, you've mentioned some of the reasons why you did it, wanting to work in Silicon Valley and everything, but looking back on it, did you, are you happy with your decision? Do you think that it was the right decision to make?
Yeah, so I think looking back right now, it's hard to say whether it's a good decision or not. I think if I let it in say 5, 10 more years, I think I can look back and see whether um, how much how much the past 4 years has really impacted my life. But in terms of say learning, um, I think I've done the most learning, not academically, but life skills and about myself in the last 4 years. So I would say the outcome is generally positive, but I say the experience has still been a little too fresh for me to say whether I've gotten out of this period without any scars. Because there are some things that comes with sort of being independent and staying on your own. Um, I would say it's generally good, and it's for right now. It seems like things have been good in general, but to sort of look at the overall big picture in my life, I would say it's still a bit too fresh. But yeah, the most learning I've done in the past 4 years.
So that'll do it for us today on the Study Space podcast. Thank you all for listening. We know very well that there are countless podcasts being published every single day, and especially now, given the pandemic, everybody seems to be starting a podcast now. But you have decided to listen to ours in particular, and we really appreciate that. It means a lot to us that you've given us your time to listen to several students ramble on about school. In this case, it's 3 students, right? The show notes with links and everything that we mentioned in this episode for further reading and learning are on our website at uniplan.dev. If you wish to show your support, share the podcast or tell a friend about it. Of course, your testimonial to your friends and family is the most helpful thing that you can do for us in support of our show. We are, of course, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. That'll be it for this one, and we'll see you next time on the Study Space podcast.